Let me introduce our speakers. Dan Adams is founder and CEO of NENS, and Michael Kirkalakis is principal at NENS. Now let me turn things over to Michael to review the agenda and get us into the conversation.
Thank you very much, Ted, and thank you everybody for attending today. Today we're going to review improving security and effectiveness of video conferencing. So let's talk about today what we're going to have. What is included in our holiday recipe? So today we're going to go over the key ingredients for a great video conference. What does your home studio look like, or what should it look like? Life hacks for Zoom, life hacks for MS Teams. How do you secure all of it? And as you got in the invite, we have a couple of presents. So what did Santa bring? So I'm going to hand it over to Dan now to talk a little bit about what a good studio should look like.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. All of us have been thrust into broadcasting. Most of us a year ago were simply just working in our offices. Life was happy. There were no problems. And all of a sudden, we have a new career. And remote web meetings, web interaction is the same thing as broadcasting. I've got a quick picture up here kind of showing a lot of the key aspects that the broadcast industry has researched and over time realized are the key things that need to be there. I want to share them with you today. So let's jump in the next slide if we can, Michael, and let's just talk about this. You need to think that you are in a studio. There's no more excuses. I think March, April, we were all thrown into it. From this point on, we kind of need to know we're broadcasting and kind of be aware of our surroundings and what we have. So where are you broadcasting from? Is there enough space? Does it meet what you're trying to get done? Are there noise and distractions? Other things that can distract you, as my, unfortunately, as my phone just did, right? Flipped up. I should have flipped that over. But things that can break into your meeting. Michael, there's a couple others if I can get you to scroll a little bit. Thank you. Newscasters have an advantage. Newscasters get to just sit and read. You have to run your screen. You have to look into the camera. You have to have your content up. All those different things need to be there. So a home studio is a little bit more complex than a broadcasting studio. And the next slide, if you would, kind of shows that you have to have a combination of both broadcast studio and also still a functional workspace, because you have to get work done. So you're going to have to consider all these layout needs. Let's jump into light, if we will. Lighting, a lot of us know that lighting is critical. Some of us do not know this, so I want to talk about this. Light can make you look older. Light can make you look engaged. Light can make you look tired. All these different components, and it's just light and how it is there. Old-time movies knew this. Even Alfred Hitchcock, the angle of the light can make you look like a villain or it can make you look like a hero. So for us, being aware of angles is very important. So there's two key things in lighting we'll share. One is a three-point technique, and the three-point technique is you have one key light on you, generally your best side, if you know what your best side is. You have a second light to balance it so you don't have a lot of harsh light. Yeah, for me, there is no best side. Just light me up. It's not going to work. And then a light in the background to kind of balance out so you do not look two-dimensional. If you only have a light source from the front, you can look a little flat. So that's why traditionally, and if you look at, if we went back to the broadcast picture, you'll see there's multiple lights coming in to make you look 3D. But you want to make sure that you're well lit and then it's balanced. Now, in a pinch, in the next point, a front light is critical. A lot of people, though, use the light off the screen of their PC. That's not going to make you look good. It's going to be a blue light. It's a green light, and blue and greens on the face make you look a little sick. So ideally, you want to have a warm light. And that warm light is going to make you look healthy. It's kind of like having a tan, a warm glow. Last part I'll add to this in light, because I didn't know where to put this, is still dressing the part. When you are going to a meeting or you go into the office, you're kind of aware of how you're dressed. Now, I'm in an ugly Christmas sweater, so obviously I'm not doing very well to impress everyone. But if you are in a video meeting, you still need to be aware of that. Light plays into that. Sometimes light isn't going to look good in certain colors and others, and I hate to say it, but sometimes you're just going to have to test, and you're going to have to kind of understand how you look best in. Newscasters, they know their colors. You kind of need to learn those same things yourself. Next slide I have here kind of shows a lot of the components that I've been talking about. So you can see we've got a couple lights that are up in the side. That one's going to be a key light or a strong light. They've even got a light ring in the front, and the camera's in the middle of that light ring to balance things out. Now, this is somebody who set up a very aggressive home studio and is obviously very concerned about looking their best. I don't know how far you want to go personally, but having something there is a lot better than nothing, and just be aware of it. Why don't we move on if we can? So we've talked about light. The next part we need to talk about is the quality of the sound. And I want to share with you a couple things about microphones that a lot of us may not know by default. So the quality of the mic makes a huge difference. In computing, we say garbage in, garbage out. It's the same thing with your microphone. If you do not have a good microphone, there's no way you can sound decent. You just can't do it. And a lot of us that have PC-based microphones on our laptops, they're not great. The microphones in a Mac product tend to be a little better because they're more aware of multimedia, but you do want to have a good microphone. The other thing we'll talk about is a windscreen and isolation. You'll see sometimes there's a little round pad in front of a microphone. What that is for is when we speak, there's certain sounds that come out, fricatives, if you will, that have pops and all these different things. If you've got a bad microphone, that wind coming out slaps against the ribbon that's receiving the sound and can cause a distortion, and it sounds bad. We've all been on a phone call or we've heard something that's clipped. That's the technical term. The sound is clipped. A windscreen protects that. The other thing I'll make you aware of is if your microphone's sitting on your desktop and you're tapping your desktop or you're moving things that are touching the desktop, that sound will transfer through that device to the desk to your microphone. You don't want that, and you're not even aware of it. So be aware, isolate. Sometimes a simple towel can make a big difference there. Okay, input volume is another interesting point. When you test and join a web conference, most of the time there's an option to test your sound. You want your sound to be up to that yellow level and pretty much living at that yellow level. That means you're getting a strong enough signal that you sound good. Going into the red, that means you're starting to clip. You can touch the red every once in a while, but you don't want to be living in the red. So if you're just kind of balancing in the green in the bottom, the signal's not strong enough. Turn it up. Another couple quick points here. Be considerate, know your mute button. The sounds you don't think are being picked up often are. We know people that have been eating chips and snacks and other things like that. Be aware, mute, and also know where it is. So in a pinch, if you need to mute your background, you know where it's at and you can get to it. A lot of programs actually have a little hotkey you can use as well. Okay, last point I'll talk about sound, if you will, and that is bandwidth. When you speak or when you broadcast audio, video going back and forth, it chews up internet bandwidth. If you have a lot of people at home that are streaming things or a bad internet connection, your quality can be not so great. So be aware if you are having video quality or sound quality issues, it may be the bandwidth. Okay, let's move on to the second part of microphones, and just to point this out. When you purchase a microphone, microphones are built to do different things. And there's, real quick, there's an omnidirectional microphone, and then there's generally a directional microphone, in just to kind of break them down in two camps. Omnidirectional is something you want to have in a conference room so it can pick up everybody around. If you're broadcasting, though, you don't want to pick up everything around. If the cat decides to move or whatever the case is, ideally, you don't want to hear that. So you want a directional microphone, and that's the second thing, cardioid or directional. Decent microphones will have that option, have that setting. So just be aware of it, okay? Let's move on to camera. And camera, quality of camera is critical. Now, early COVID, it was really hard to find cameras because we are all scrambling to do it. But finding a good 1080p camera is very easy at this point. Just hop on Amazon and you can get it within a week or less at this point. Light sensitivity is something you want to look for in your camera, and what that means is it has the ability to understand autofocus and try and correct if you've got a bad lighting situation so you don't look so bad. So a light sensitive camera is something to be aware of. Once again, last point to kind of share on this is Apple products are phenomenal with multimedia. So if you have a Apple laptop or even your iPad, I know people that will work off their iPad for web conferencing and then use their PC for keeping track of their business and their work, just because they are so good at doing that. Let's move forward and go into the composition part of it. How you look and how well you fill the screen is important. So just like an artist when they're painting is aware of the balance of things in the screen, we have to be aware of it too. Why? Well, the broadcast industry has kind of taught us what a good standard is, and unfortunately, subliminally, when we're watching somebody and interacting with somebody, we're picking up on these cues. Are we trusting this person? Are we believing this person? Or do we feel like something's a little amiss? And so the things I'm going to share about composition today are all about helping you gain that advantage or just be aware of. It's not like we're trying to manipulate, but you do need to be aware. If you're not close enough to the camera or you're too close, it has an impact. So let's move on to the next slide, if you will. There's a rule of tic-tac-toe. And what that is you just want your eyes, for the most part, to be on that top line in the middle. Now you're filling the screen. It's kind of a quick rule of thumb for you to look at. And just be aware of it. Take a glance. The other thing I'll share on this is distance. We talked about. We got 3 pictures of the same person here. I thought about moving myself back and forth, but here you can see it very clearly. If you're far away, you're less engaged. Then there's the balanced picture in the middle, and then we have the Seinfeld too close talker at the front. It can be distracting. So also be aware, like the tic-tac-toe rule is kind of a cheat, right? If you take a glance and steal a glance. At the same time, let's move to the next slide, if you will, and let's talk about eye angle. And this is a hard part. For those of us who are reading a screen and have data on a screen, we have a tendency, or if our picture of ourselves is over here on our screen, let's say, we have a tendency to want to look at ourselves. And so if I'm looking at myself, you feel disengaged. I'm not speaking to you. So there's an importance of having the camera also at eye angle, back on that 2/3 tic-tac-toe thing, and you want to be looking directly at it. Now, human nature is not to stare at a camera. You're going to have to get used to this, but this is something you need to work on, especially because you want to connect with the other people on the other side. And if you're not looking directly, now a small change, I'm going to look up 3 inches, and this is why I'm sharing this screen to show with you. If I'm looking at you like I am now, it's great. I just went 3 inches up. The engagement changes, so just be aware of it. Now, it's not natural to completely stare the whole time right at it, but just be aware of who you're talking to, and unfortunately it's that little lens. Sometimes I will grab a Post-it note and I will stick it on there with a little smiley to remind me that's who I'm talking to. Michael, those are the points I kind of wanted to share here. Why don't we kick it back over to you?
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. And one thing that I should have mentioned earlier is we do have a ton of content to go through. There's going to be a lot of Christmas cheese throughout this as well, so I should have warned everybody as we go through this. So we'll get into some Zoom holiday tips. Some of this stuff I think a lot of you know. There's some stuff that you might not know. So if you have any questions, I encourage everybody to put some questions in Ted, and we'll address them at the end of this. So things I want to talk about here is some of the Zoom holiday tips. A little later on, we're going to talk about securing Zoom and Microsoft Teams, and there's a good chunk of content there. But here we're going to talk about changing background. We're going to talk about how it works and how you can make it useful, and also how and why do I record a meeting. So changing backgrounds in Zoom. when you're in your Zoom meeting, you click down to where you see the video button, and once you click on that, you'll see the pop-up, and you can now from there you can choose a virtual background. One thing that's important to note here is there are some virtual backgrounds that are already in there. There are some backgrounds that allow you to have a moving background. I would strongly encourage anybody to not use a moving background during a meeting. It can be distracting for the people attending. So you definitely want to have something that's more static. If you're trying to, if you're working out of your home, trying to hide the background, that's what these things are really great for. You can see that I've taken a picture at NENS of our logo, and in the true Christmas spirit. This is a trip we took many years ago, and we were in Disney when the Osborne lights were up, so I figured I'd pop that up in there so that people could check it out. But you'll also notice that there's a plus button in here, and that plus button allows you to add some content you might download from the internet. I can also just do your own content as I added my picture here as well. So annotating in Zoom. There are a lot of great uses for this. I know that when we're doing presentations, reviewing quotes, when we're going over network designs and diagrams, I often rely on the annotation in Zoom. And the annotation is right at the top. When you click in Zoom, you'll see your menu bar. You can click on annotate. And then here you'll see all the different things that you can do with annotation. The things I typically utilize are both the drawing, adding some texts, to diagrams and so forth. And this is still one of my favorite Christmas movies around, and it is a major reward. So an easy way to show how you can use Zoom and do some annotation to highlight different things in your presentations.
Excellent.
Zoom recordings, really simple. Again, back down to the menu bar, you click on the record button. You can record. You can pull the recording down locally to your computer. You can leave it up in the cloud. Again, as I mentioned, for us, the things that I find that work really well for this is if I know I'm about to sit down and go through a deep dive and explain something, I often will record those meetings, and after the meeting is done, I can take all of that content and then utilize it in a training, right? At NENS, we have our own LMS, our own learning management system, where I can now cut up some of the videos and then upload them. As we have new employees start and we're going over different applications and how we work, I'll often record those those Zoom meetings, and then I will forward that recording on to that employee so that they can refer back to what that training was about. And again, also for presenting quotes, we often find there are times that not everybody can make the meeting, and I found it really useful to be able to send that recording and that presentation where we've gone through detail in what the quote or proposal has, so that they can share it with the people that weren't able to attend and help people make decisions much easier with that recording. All right, Dan, I'm handing it back over to you for Microsoft Teams.
Thank you. It's an interesting thing, and I'm going to talk a little about recording as well, but we've been creating files for a long time, but now that we're having video meetings and video chats, it's a different type of file. And as businesses, as new as using video is for a lot of us and communicating that way, the video files and how to appropriately use those, that's going to be another part that's going to enter into our businesses that we need to figure out how we're going to use most effectively and protect them. So it's a good thing to bring up. Let's jump into a few Teams tips. Now, Teams is a whole work suite, right? So Teams moves beyond broadcasting or video conferencing and video meetings. Zoom is extremely robust and has a lot of tools for that, where Teams has that, some of the core parts of the video conferencing in, but then there's a whole bunch of other tools. So a couple of the tips I have are kind of Teams basic for the whole thing, and some of them are for those meetings and the video casting. So the first thing I'll throw up here is using the /. You throw that slash in here in the toolbar, and it pulls up a whole bunch of commands. Like Windows, there's a lot of stuff is mouse driven and you need to know where to click, but a lot of it can be jumped to real quick if you know how to use the hotkeys. Michael's someone that's taught me a lot of this, is very quick, and he's always been one to go in and dive into what's the faster way to get something done. And often in our meetings, he's correcting us or helping teach us when we're doing 4 clicks when there's really just a quick command to get that done. So first thing to do, if you are a Teams user, I would strongly suggest use that / and look at the options. There's a lot of different things that could be pulled up real quick. Let's move to the next thing, if you will. So there's the more options, or the ... section in most of these menus in Teams, and that's where they hid a bunch of options that we couldn't, they just didn't have enough room on the ribbon bar to put these all in. So these are the kind of key areas, and I want to talk about 2 or 3 of these if I can. So the apply background effects. That's one of the first things we all jump to, as Michael was talking about. So that's where you can go and add something in the background if you don't have a lovely picture of the Caribbean of where where you'd like to be. Turn on and off live captions. I don't know if you've experimented with this yet, but if you turn this on, it will take what you're saying and transcribe it, and it'll appear there right at the bottom as you're going. So if you're in a situation where you have to have the sound off or you're muted or whatever, you can actually see the conversation that's going on. There's also the start record function, which Michael's talked about within Zoom, and that's a critical thing. Just make sure that you've got permission, or if somebody outside the company, based on the policy, to record or ask permission. You still want to be considerate of that and respectful of others. And last but not least, the thing I'll draw attention to in this slide is the turn off incoming video. Turning off incoming video is back to that bandwidth issue. If you're getting choppy video, or you're not hearing the audio well, because audio is probably the most important to hear what's going on, you do have the ability to turn that off, and that'll reduce your bandwidth requirement. So if you do record, and the next slide I here show that I have recorded something, once it's been recorded, it will now be available to you that you can open it up in where it's been saved. And by default, it would save it to Microsoft Stream. Going forward in January, there'll be some changes to that, but you're able to see it. And you can see, you can share it, do some little things about it. The one thing I'll point out here, and this isn't highlighted at the bottom, it says company recording policy. You should have a company policy, because if you have a recording, you don't want that shared everywhere by default. There might be rules to it, and strongly encourage you to have IT usage policies so you're not getting caught behind the 8 ball. All your employees know what is appropriate. So the next slide I'm sharing, if you've recorded it, you can open it up, and if you haven't transcribed it or turned CC on, it will actually, as an option, you can go back and turn it on. It will re-index your whole video conference and give you a script. So you can go back, and then you can edit the script if you want, and you can save the script. Now, the script, I will say, in the Microsoft Teams version is text, and then it has some digital information encoding of who spoke to who. It doesn't say Dan spoke to Michael or Dan spoke to Ted. Unfortunately, it gives you your IP address and timestamp and some of these digital things. If you do have a desire to have a clean transcript with who spoke to who, without all that digital stuff in it, if you're kind of taking notes, there are companies out there like rev.com, rev.com, and they will take a transcript or an audio file, and they will clean it up and send you back names and everything. So that's an option if you want to do that, but there's some good default stuff inside of Teams. The last tip I want to share for Teams, and this is back away from video conferencing, but overall usage of Teams. In every Teams channel, you have the ability to add different tabs or applications or resources that team needs to be effective. Here is something where I've added, we use Adobe Cloud for some of our images. And so in the sales and marketing channel, I added Adobe Cloud. I get asked a lot of times, hey, where's that picture we use for such and such? By linking this up, this put all of those resources that we have purchased as NENs under a pool that now anyone else can pull up from. Now, that's just the Adobe Creative Cloud. On the next slide, when you want to add a tab to a channel, there is a plethora of choices. So you can add additional Microsoft applications, or there's tons of stuff in here. So I would encourage you that if you are a Teams user and you have created a channel for a specific team with specific tasks, look at the tabs. There might be applications on scheduling, communication, project planning, those type of things that can be plugged right in so everybody has access to those resources and tools right within the channel they're doing their work in. So those are some quick tips for you on Teams, and encourage you to move beyond the basics and learn a little bit more, since we're going to be stuck video conferencing here probably for here going forward.
Thanks, Dan. Next on deck is we're going to talk about how to use video conferencing in the most secure way possible. So today we're going to cover general security best practices. We're going to talk about, so what if the Grinch comes down the chimney, and I'm going to go through a couple of different settings for people. I do want to also point another thing out. We're not going to do a how-to, right? So I'm not going to be, going, click by click as to how to do everything. So it's going to be an overview. But at the end of this, again, we'll have some time for people to ask questions or even send questions to us if there's something more specific you want to get into. So general security best practices. First thing is, are you protected as an individual, right? So is the network that you're on protected? Is your workstation protected? So we always want to make sure that the first thing that we have is just good security posture. So we want to protect the perimeter with a firewall. We want to make sure if you're using wireless networking, that's done securely. If you're not in the office, which most of us aren't, how do you protect your devices on and off the network? Multi-factor authentication, and then an integrated security solution. So here's my Vanna White moment. Cisco has been a fantastic partner for us for a long, long time. So I chose to use a lot of their slides here and talk a little bit about some of the products. So this is a Cisco Meraki Teleworker solution. So as you can see, you have that red circle over the office because you're not there right now. So now you're working remotely. So we want to make sure that we have specific things in place, making sure that if you can have a firewall at your home office to protect the perimeter, you have some type of secure wireless connection, as I mentioned before. And then we're also going to talk about things like Cisco Umbrella. So Cisco Umbrella is something that if you are a NENS client, every managed device that NENS has Umbrella on it. It's just an entry point to what we do for every single client that comes on board. And this is how we protect devices on and off the network, is we're putting a layer of security that travels with you wherever you go, right? It's that kind of bubble around your laptop. And again, this isn't a Cisco-based webinar, but I just wanted to point out a few things. The multi-factor authentication is critical. Our preferred application is Duo, which is also owned by Cisco. It's seamless. It takes seconds to approve an application, or a login, I should say. And this is just one of those things that you really need to protect all the applications. Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and so forth is having some level of MFA set up. So Microsoft Teams security. Interestingly enough, there isn't a ton to do from within Microsoft Teams in setting up a meeting. We will be doing a webinar in the future around securing Microsoft Office 365. There's so much that you can do there, and that's going to be a later date. But for these purposes, as I mentioned before, MFA is critical. And here are just the few options that are actually available to you, and we're going to go through these in a little bit of detail. But you can set up a lobby, so when people go to join the meeting, they can just be waiting so that people aren't meeting together prior to joining. And there are a couple of instances where that makes sense. If it's an internal meeting and you want individuals to talk, that's fine. But if you're inviting a bunch of external people and trying to collaborate with outside people and getting people together, you might want to control how people come into that meeting. So you're gonna set up a lobby. As you can see the arrows here, allowing users to bypass announce when callers join or leave, so that you, as the presenter or owner of that meeting, know when people are popping in and out. You can control who presents, and whether or not you want to allow attendees to mute or unmute. And here are the really simple, some of the simple settings. So when you're setting up the lobby and who can bypass it, you can see that can be, everyone can bypass it. People that are within the organization are trusted, people in my organization and guests, or just the presenter. And of course, you want to set it up to be only me if you want to be able to control everybody that comes in and out of that meeting. Next one is, control who can present. So here again, very similar. It can be everyone. It can be people in the organization. You can pick specific people, or it can just be you. One thing that I didn't have a screenshot here, but I can touch upon is that once you get into Microsoft Teams, you can select that only you is allowed to present. But if people during that course of that meeting say, hey, you know what, there is something that I'd really like to present, you can actually click on the attendee and give them presentation rights, right? So now you can be selective when you're in the meeting as to what features you turn on and off. Next, we're going to jump into Zoom. Zoom is a little bit more robust from a how much granular control from the meeting do you have as to what you can do from a security standpoint, and we're going to review a lot of that stuff, in the coming slides. Zoom is just hyper-focused, as we all know, on meetings, where Microsoft Teams is a full collaboration suite. So where Zoom is hyper-focused on just doing the video meetings, we're going to touch upon all the things that are here in these upcoming slides. But as I mentioned before, multi-factor authentication, right? So not allowing somebody, if they have your username and password, to be able to log into your Zoom account and impersonate you, and you really want to avoid things like that. We'll talk about setting up waiting rooms, muting participants, passcodes, personal IDs, how to set up alternative hosts, how you can limit screen sharing, securing phone participants, which is pretty important, that a lot of people miss. How to lock a meeting, which means not allowing more people to come in, and then I call it Bob Marley's secret meeting. So here is, for anybody who's set up a Zoom meeting before, right? You're very, very familiar with this. So this comes up, and what you'll have here is generate a meeting ID, right? A specific meeting ID you need. There's a passcode, which you want to make sure is set here. And then here, right down here, you'll see that there's a waiting room button. So if you're going to be setting up a meeting and you don't want a bunch of people joining before you, and you want to be able to be selective as to who you admit into that room, you'd want to set up a waiting room for the Zoom meetings. In that same setup, as I scroll down and I do this other screenshot, you can see that there are a couple of additional points here. So you can allow participants to join anytime, as I mentioned. For internal meetings, I think that's totally fine. Muting participants upon entry, I think, is always something good to have, all right? So just in case there's background noise when people are joining, especially in a big meeting, dogs barking, kids asking, how they get on their own Zoom meeting and how to do their classwork. You want to make sure that I would suggest that you do that for every meeting. Only allowing authenticated users. So that is that secret Bob Marley meeting. What we want here is we want to make sure that only the people that you want to take part in that meeting are invited to that meeting, that they can't just click on a link. So a lot of things with this, with the Zoom bombing that's happened that you saw in the news, early on during the pandemic, is that people are just forwarding on, the meeting IDs, and then even some of the meeting passcodes. What this forces people to do is, even if they have that, if they're not an authorized user and cannot sign in, they won't be able to join the meeting. So that's pretty critical to put in for any meeting where you don't want people to be able to forward that along. Alternative host is also a really good idea. So in the event that you as the presenter or host get held up in a meeting prior, depending on the importance of that meeting, having a second person in mind to be able to take over and start that meeting on time. I always advise that. Also, of course, it's going to be dependent on the content. Now, once you're in the meeting, I wanted to be able to point out that you can click over on the participant list, and then there are a couple of additional controls that you can put in place for an individual. So in the next slide, I'm going to talk about how we can do stuff across the entire meeting. But as you have multiple participants, you can ask them to start video. You can make them a host. You can rename them. You can put them back into the waiting room. You can remove them all together. You can even report them to Zoom if they're a bad actor trying to get into a meeting. So lastly, from Zoom security, down in the when you're in a Zoom and you're in your Zoom meeting, you can click on that security icon, and here are a couple of things that are available to you. One is locking the meeting. What locking a meeting means is that it will not allow any additional participants into the meeting, even if you had invited them, even if they're a registered user, no matter what that is. As soon as you lock a meeting, that will not allow any additional people into that meeting. So it can be very, very useful for people that want to be able to lock that down. Next part is you can see allowing participants. What can you allow all participants to do that are taking part in that meeting? So you can either take the rights away or give them rights to do the screen share, chat, rename, unmute, or even start a video. And you can also remove participants as I mentioned earlier. There is one setting that I'd mentioned earlier, talking about securing phone participants. If somebody was to hand out, forward that Zoom meeting, you need to make sure that passcode is enforced. If the passcode is not enforced, anybody with that ID can call into the Zoom meeting and then listen and record to what's happening on that meeting. So securing phone participants is just one of those things that a lot of people don't know about and don't focus on. And the one nice thing about Zoom is that when you look at the attendees list, assuming it's not a very, very large attendee list, you'll see pretty easily if there are people. So in the smaller meetings, it's really easy to see if you have people dialing into that meeting, and you can check to see if it looks suspicious. But I strongly encourage you to also put the passwords on if you're going to have a large meeting where people might be dialing in.
That's an interesting point, right? So if you got a log of everything that's happened, that's another area that you need to be checking from time to time, like an invoice or a data log, or who has access to the files, is doing a quick audit to see who actually was there and are there people that shouldn't be.
Correct. Absolutely.
Let's do a couple questions. Just kind of one basic one. Dan, maybe some of these items are what you recommend, but in terms of recommendations for hardware brands or models for lighting and cameras, do you have some basic recommendations? You showed some very advanced configurations on the one hand,
yeah,
but how to get people started?
Good question. Really, I think the one of the safest things to do is the Logitech family of items is generally a higher quality and has some good features. So Logitech's a safe bet for the most part. The other area that once again, I can't say enough about Apple's products. If you're using Apple-based stuff, I've seen people use their camera, an Apple camera, and mount that and have that their video and then work off their other screen. So if you're really concerned about that and a higher quality, that's a great way to go. As far as lighting can get expensive real quick. So, and I haven't found one brand that really trumps everybody else. It's one of those things that I would suggest look on Amazon, look for a lot of high reviews, look for something that's going to mount or be in the area where you need. Do you need the suction cup mount on the back of your laptop, or can you use a tripod and stand, kind of based on what you need? Something a lot of high ratings, and then something that changes the color. If you look at this picture we have here, you'll see that they show on the goodie rings or the 10-inch light rings, you'll see that there's different colored lights in the ring. You want something that's gonna look good. In fact, what I'll do is on my light right now, I'm gonna switch. That's just a pure bright white. You can see what it does. It makes me look bald, and in reality, there's a lot more hair. I changed down this kind of a blended color, and then this is kind of more of a natural color, so then the hair comes out. So look for something that changes in heat temperature or light temperature and has a mount that's going to work for your particular setup, and then a lot of good reviews on Amazon.
I'm going to make just a quick plug on the Loom Cube, and I'm just going to show the box here. The reason I like this, just to throw this out here, is it has that suction cup that Dan was talking about, and this thing is small and convenient. It can just be thrown in your laptop bag, and it really works well just attaching it to a laptop. Pretty affordably priced. I dropped a Loom Cube link in there as well. So that's just a quick plug from me on something I've had good luck with, and found a lot of other people are having pretty good success with Loom Cube. So
yeah, that item that we have up here in the upper left, the light tripod and laptop mount, that does have, so if you need to mount it on, and you'll find those same type of things on Amazon. So that has a suction cube, it has the light that goes to it, and a tripod should you not be a laptop user.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just throw out another one just in this whole tripod topic. Sometimes it's tricky where you put the camera. Sometimes people have like these monstrous monitors, and you have this problem where you have to put your camera right up on the top of your monstrous monitor so it's looking down on you. And so one option is to use these kind of selfie sticks that also work as a tripod where you can attach your camera. So that's another little life hack.
To your point, I have, and you can buy a tripod with a gooseneck. And so my camera right now, and I wish we could but I can't show you because my camera's showing me. And if I move my camera, then you won't see where it's at. But my camera literally right now is in the middle of my monitor. It's blocking the center of my monitor. So back to that workspace issue. I have a gooseneck. I put the camera at eye level when I'm broadcasting or in a web conference. And when I'm not, I bend it. I actually move the whole gooseneck and just move it out of the way. So getting that back to eye level, it's good to have a camera mount that is gonna be able to be moved to where you need it and moved out. My son was telling me in the future, they need to start developing these things so they're integrated into the actual screen, our actual monitors. But for the time being, we have to deal with moving them.
Let me try giving this a shot, Ted. I'm going to try to spin this around and see if I can get this in the view. So
there you go. Yeah. Fantastic.
So we have
so it's
the gooseneck there. Yeah, go ahead, Ted. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, it's I think we've seen everything from, hey, how are you going to set up a broadcast studio in your living room, to how do you look good on the road just when you're using a laptop and you want to add a little bit of lighting so you look good on camera. So let's go to some of these questions. This is David has a question that's more kind of a little bit deeper on Teams, and it's more kind of collaboration related. In Teams, can an Excel spreadsheet that's saved, a spreadsheet be saved daily and then be viewed by all the users when the admin of the file saves it in the Teams app? Also, is there a way, I guess, to talk to us about how, let me just kind of paraphrase the question. Talk to us about how in Teams, users in Teams collaborate on traditional Office files like Word and Excel. Talk to us about how that works, how easy is it to do, that sort of thing.
Michael, go ahead.
I'll take this one, Dan. Thank you. When before Microsoft Teams, we would put things on a share. In Excel, you could say, I want to have this as a shared workbook where multiple people could try to be in it at the same time. For those of us that really tried hard to utilize that feature and function, know that it didn't really work so well. They've actually done an amazing job and perfected it in Teams. So when we're working on Word, Excel, even the PowerPoint presentation here, I'll use Excel because it's much easier. If Dan and I are in an Excel worksheet together, whatever cell Dan is in, if he's in like C3 on the cell, it'll be highlighted. It'll show that Dan is working, or is working in that cell. And we've made changes while we're in the file together, and those changes are real time. When I mean real time, I mean like within a second. Within a second of Dan putting in something into that cell, I'm able to see it on my side. What I still strongly suggest, though, and Microsoft might not like me saying this, but what I still strongly suggest, though, is I do still appreciate opening up Excel or Word and the app itself. So when you're in Microsoft Teams, you're in the Teams application, and then when you launch an application, you're launching the application within a Teams window. And right at the middle for now, right, because they always change it, because that's the thing about the cloud, they can always move where these buttons live. But for right now, in the middle of that, in the top center, you can say open in desktop app. The awesome thing about that is in Teams, when you open it in the desktop app, it's not like you're downloading it and you're just looking at it locally on your machine anymore. You're actually opening it up from within that Teams location, right, wherever it's saved within SharePoint. So as you're making changes and as you're editing things, it's the same exact experience. I can see exactly what Dan's doing, what he's changing. The other thing I love about Teams and how they've perfected this is, the comments now are not just comments that you leave on your own. If I do an @Dan Adams or an @Josh Oakes or an @Ted Halsey, it's going to ping them and let them know that I put a comment, in a particular file that they can now go look at and then see what my comment was, and now we can have a whole collaboration string going on all the way down on that particular.
Yeah. And if I can to add to this, you create a simple channel or a team, if you will, and you put a file in it. Everybody in that group has the ability to see it. So security-wise, make sure that you're only putting files in there that you want everyone in the team to see. But then by default, everyone there can open that file and use it. You can use it simultaneously. You do not have to go change a bunch of stuff. It takes care of that for you. As Michael said, it's best to download the app. It's more stable. Just doing it through Teams, it's just not as stable as the full application. And then using that / command I told you, you can type the word unread, and it will show you everything in your channels and in your teams that have been modified and updated that you haven't looked at yet. So it really is a powerful way to be aware, to share, and also be aware of what's been changing that you haven't seen.
Okay, a related question. When do you use Zoom and when do you use Teams? So are there different use cases and there's other applications like WebEx and GoToMeeting and others. When do you use these different solutions? Are there best use cases for some of them?
Yeah, it is a good question. Within our organization, within NENS, we have adopted Teams wholesale, right? So anytime we're doing an internal meeting, level of integration of being able to bounce in between the different Teams channels and how we have it all structured, for us it just makes sense, right? Because all of it is right there. With Zoom, and one of the reasons Zoom got a lot of crap early on about their security was that they made it super easy to use. So when we're collaborating with people outside of the organization, we do find that it's much easier to send out a Zoom invite and get people into a Zoom meeting. We found that Teams, you can do it, but we've just found that Teams takes a little bit more to get in. It's not just clicking on a link where it pops open, an application and you're right in. So
yeah, real quick, I would just say, if it's inside your company and you're working on files and collaborating together and you own Office 365, you need to really look at Teams. If you have a lot of communication with people outside your company, and interlocking teams without other companies, and it's a little bit more, and it can be done, and we do it, but it's not so much plug and play and Polaroid-ish, if you will, as the WebEx or the Zoom type meeting, because they're built for just cloud-based face-to-face communication.
Right, and if you remember, as I those features, right, with the annotation and so forth, right, there's just Teams is really not built as well as Zoom is for doing that type of presentation, right? Being able to like annotate, underline, right? There's just so you'll be able to figure out on your own, right, what a good use case is for this. But as Dan said, for the internal collaboration, we have a policy, right, a legitimate policy. We say all internal meetings are Microsoft Teams and external meetings are Zoom.
Right, and I guess I'll just jump in and throw out one other thing is also just kind of think about, I think as Michael mentioned, think about whether is this an internal meeting or is this an external collaboration. The key thing is ease of use for the people who are joining. not necessarily for the presenter or organizer. That's really the key. And I would just throw out there, also think about, what are you doing? Are you doing a video conference with a small group? Are you doing internal team collaboration, or are you doing a webinar where you're presenting to a lot of people, or you're doing an external training with people joining from dozens of different kinds of organizations? So for instance, we're using GoToWebinar right now, and from a video conferencing perspective, there's not a huge difference between the GoTo suite of products and Teams and Zoom. But what GoToWebinar does really well is they make the registration process for webinars super easy, and there's a whole workflow designed to get all of our audience into the event. And so just remember kind of like what you're trying to do. I think GoToTraining is another good one, where if you're trying to do real classrooms where you have polling and lots of kind of quizzes and progress checks, and it's an instructor and a student type format, there's other solutions that are also better. So just we're in this virtual world, and think about all the different use cases that you could potentially have, and then try to use the best solution at the best time.
Yeah, I know it's not a great answer, because obviously sometimes we want just the one, right? But really, they are different tools, and you have to be aware. You have to be aware what you're using it for. Sorry, Ted, go ahead.
Yeah, so let's grab a couple more questions, and then I think raffle off the last two items. Yeah. So Colleen one says, are there particularly good sources for general presentation skills or training for virtual meetings? So any advice on how people can train up their teams? Point people on their teams to just improving their general presentation skills.
That's a great question, right? Because it's like speaking, right? So there's not, to my knowledge, there's not Toastmasters for webinars really type situation. A lot of it that I've found is being aware of the basics, like we shared, right? Lighting, quality of camera, quality of audio, and then positioning. And that you'll get a huge jump from that. And so being aware of that. Now, it's kind of hard to do, like for right now, if I'm talking, but I'm not looking at myself. If I'm looking at myself, I'm doing this. And so it's one of those catch-22s. So one of the best things I can recommend here is recording yourself by yourself. If you're really concerned about raising your skill level, one of the best things you can do, just have a meeting with yourself. You can do that. Click record and practice. And you'll find that doing that a few times, you'll see what your tells are. Some of us say, the stir, those vocal things that, or some of us look the wrong direction, and you'll catch those things if you're recording yourself. And I can't recommend that enough. Musicians do it, broadcasters do it. Record yourself, see what other people are doing, because it's impossible to see. You can think you're coming across a certain way, but until it's recorded, you really don't know.
Okay, yeah, we only have just about. Go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
So the one thing that we do prior to this meeting kicking off is we join 15 minutes early. We do a lighting check. We do a sound check, the tic-tac-toe check to make sure that we're in the screen in the appropriate way. So back to just good old preparation, right? It's if you don't have a in-home studio that is always set up for you, on demand, you sit down and you're sitting in the right exact spot, the lighting's perfect, the camera's at the right angle, I just say, join a couple minutes early, and just test those few things out to make sure that it's exactly what you want them to. But again, just to wrap it up, as we're at right at the hour, I want to just thank everybody again for joining. If you have questions and want to dig in a little bit deeper, here's my contact information, michaelk@nens.com. My number's on here, or for general inquiries, you can also just email info@nens.com. So from me, Michael Tiny Tim Korkalakis, and everybody at the Nens family, I want to wish everybody a happy and wonderful and safe holiday.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot. Happy holidays, everybody. Take care.
Take care. Bye.